Robots Radio presents...
Today's chat is brought to you by, well, all of your support. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through Podbean's crowdfunding, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a patron of the FFC, please be sure to visit our website and click on the support link. Even a single dollar helps, and for those of you who are already patrons, thank you again for your generosity.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on January 15th, 2021 over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat as we continue our discussion over the lore book Legacy's Lament. This particular episode will serve as what we have come to call the advanced session of the week's exploration. Congratulations to those who signed up for a deeper dive. Before we go any further, however, let's run through a quick introduction of who all we have with us on the show. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86.
And this is the still trying to figure out how to recover from the start of this recording, green-eyed music lover.
This is Hey, it's Orchid, wondering if she's fired.
So special announcements. Not yet.
I need to recover for a second. So, special announcements. If you would be so kind as to visit us on thelorenetwork.com, where you can find us alongside many impressive lore content creators, and let us know your thoughts on the weekly lore roundups, both for podcasts and for YouTube. Also, if you could leave us a review over on iTunes, 5-star reviews really help us so other people can find our podcasts. You can also find us on iTunes, or you can also find us on Twitter at The Lore Network and also at Focused Fire Chat. I don't even know how to do my job anymore.
Do we have any, did you have the sponsor?
Yes, I do have the sponsor. Guys, the sponsor for tonight, audible.com. If you're listening to this right now, you too can listen to audiobooks on audible.com because audiobooks are for your ears.
Fun fact.
Really?
Audible also does podcast.
Yes, they do. Do they?
Yeah, that was,
I know that.
What was that, like a couple months back?
Yeah. DLA is on there, as well as, I think we're on there with Focus Fire.
I think we're on there as well. I want to say that we are, because that was part of their... Because is it Audible Amazon? I can always get these mixed up. Okay, yeah.
It is.
Because Amazon has their podcast, and I think they merged it with the Audible.
Yes.
I mean, cool. But what you get if you sign up for a... Shush, I'm doing my job, guys. I'm hawking wares right now, okay? I'm hawking wares. If you sign up for your free 30-day trial, it comes with a free audiobook. You get 2 free audiobooks for Amazon Prime members. And as a reminder, you can also use your Amazon Prime membership for a free sub on Twitch, which you can use on our own channel. It's good for any premium selection titles that you would like. They are yours to keep, whether you decide to keep the actual subscription or not. The Audible Plus catalog of podcasts, audiobooks, wellness, and Audible originals. You can listen all you want. There are no credits needed. And you will get a friendly email reminder before your trial ends. Different books that you could try. I really like Harry Potter because that's what I grew up with. So, I actually own all of them. I had Audible for a long time, so I actually have a lot of Audible books on my phone. And I listen to them at work, so I don't have to listen to people talk to me because I like audiobooks because I don't want to talk to humans, guys. Audiobooks are great.
No, Green, you're not allowed to talk.
It's fine.
She's not done yet.
Oh God.
I'm not.
I'm afraid to start.
Audiobooks are great because I don't need to talk to Green because we're talking about audiobooks right now. If I had one playing right now, You wouldn't have to hear Green. You just hear the audio, sweet, sweet, dulcet tones of the audiobook playing in your ear instead of Green.
You'd have the sweet, sweet,
So guys,
dulcet
go to Audible.
tones of Green in your ears instead. No, Audible has some free content now, too. They're not just the subscription service. You can also get things included in your Audible subscription that are just a lot of mainly classics and podcast and...
Or you could get Game of Thrones.
No,
Or
she
you
said
could get...
good books.
Okay, let's not start that debate. This is the advanced session, so I know it goes longer, but
Lord of the Rings.
No,
that
that's
one's acceptable.
The Hobbit seas.
Hobbitses.
Lore Hobbit seas.
Lore
He
Hobbits.
wants-
I was wondering if that's where that was going.
Yep.
Or the Dark Tower. That's also acceptable.
No, not acceptable.
Well, that's true. Green has a problem with the audiobooks of the Dark Tower.
I still haven't made it past, what is it, Wizard
I
and Glass?
don't blame you. Yeah, I don't blame you. It's
She's so scary.
she's creepy. She's creepy in the text. I can't imagine her as an actually like in your ear. Moving to lore about Destiny. God, man, I'm done.
Orchid, good job.
Is there... Thank you. I'm so good at this. Please fire me.
No. So on in the intro session, we did just kind of like a really brief overview of all the figures who were involved in the story, like a really basic summary of the story. And then like we kind of touched on the exotic quest a little bit, but only so far as it kind of augmented into the lore entries. Basically, this is a story about Banshee's history. And that I think I would argue is ultimately that's kind of the purpose of this particular lore book, is kind of to show the growth of Banshee from a not good place into the very forgetful weaponsmith that we all know and love. So one of the big questions that I had, and Orchid's gonna have some opinions on this one, is does the entirety of this lore entry constitute as, or can it be argued after reading this, that Clovis Bray is seeking redemption for his actions? Orchid, you okay over there?
Where would you like me to start?
Well, I guess real quick, short answers. Do you think that Clovis Bray is seeking redemption for his actions? Like just yes or no?
Unintentionally, yes.
Okay. You're nicer than I am because my answer is no. Green?
Is Clovis seeking redemption, or is...
Clovis Bray. Not Clovis 1. Clovis Bray.
No.
Okay. So why do you say unintentionally yes, Orchid?
I say unintentionally because while Banshee is Banshee, like Clovis 43 is still Clovis at that point, and it didn't make the decision to become Banshee 44. And still had all the memories of Clovis and all of those decisions that led him to decide to become Banshee 44, and hadn't lost all of those memories. So he made the decision himself to say, I am taking all of that knowledge and I'm taking all of those experiences, and I reject everything that Clovis decided, and that because he was Clovis. Like, well, that is what an exo is.
Except he wasn't, actually. He never had the identity.
Yeah, but that's...
He never had the identity uploaded.
No, but he still had all... Yeah, but he was still created to be that.
Correct, right.
And he rejected it.
He was the
hence
shell.
The unintentional.
But the ghost was never uploaded.
So he was the intentional. He was intended to be that, and he said, no, I'm not going to be that. So it was an unintentional redemption, saying, I'm going to be better. I'm going to go be something better and new, and do my best to, like,
I guess my
This
argument.
This is why I say that it is unintentional.
But
redemption.
my argument there is that Clovis, so Exo Clovis, Clovis 1, Clovis through 43, I would argue is not Clovis Bray.
Right. So you guys are arguing the time of who Clovis is. Orchid says it's unintentional since Clovis never got uploaded fully. But
Right.
you're saying that he didn't actually. It's the same answer. You're just arguing the semantics of the timing.
Yeah. I mean, the thing here, though, is also, so like in the new lore book War Machines that Bungie sent out, the new Grimoire book, there's 3 entries from the Bray family that center around this, and one of them is a letter from Clovis Bray that is basically calling out this idea of, he's like, well, I'm doing this because maybe you can seek amends for the damage that I've done. Which, I mean, I'm like, okay, so you're basically giving lip service to redemption because you're on your deathbed. But that's not contrition. Like, that's not, you don't get redeemed by someone else coming and doing the amending of your deeds. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, he says he recognizes the things that he's done, but he doesn't ever fully lament them. He doesn't, because at the end, he argues that they were necessary sacrifices.
I don't think that Clovis went in intending redemption. Clovis was all about legacy. He could care less about redemption. He just wanted his legacy. But the fact that Banshee is the embodiment of essentially wanting to be the grandfather to Elsie that she never had, that moment is a redeeming moment for the Exo.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily for Clovis, but for the Exo, who is part Clovis. So I see the leeway between the two.
But he really isn't.
That's kind of where I bridge the two together, because him doing that and seeing himself as part of her family has him acknowledging that he is Clovis. That at that point.
The other thing to keep in mind, though, is that because the Clovis Exo Banshee Clovis 43 is not the same memories as the originator, you can argue the nurture versus nature kind of thing here too.
And that's my point. That is what I'm arguing, is because Clovis 1 was created with all the physical traits of Clovis. Like, he had the intellect, the physical prowess of all the superior Exo, but the memories, the mind that is Clovis Bray was never put into that Exo.
You can have a redemption of somebody without having them make that decision, though. You can have a redeeming thing that happens for them without them doing it. Contrition does not mean actual redemption.
Well, contrition, yeah. So just real quick, contrition. When we say contrition, I'm actually referring to the actual like dictionary definition of feeling remorse for an action, and also penitent. Like you have to feel remorse. My point is that Clovis does not feel remorse.
What I'm saying is that you can have a character who portrays evil throughout an entire movie, and in the last moment do something that seems selfless without actually having remorse built into it.
Yeah, they do in anime all the time. They have the bad character like save a puppy in the end. And then all the girls like hearts melt because he's doing it in the rain or something, but he's still like a bad character because he stabbed 6 guys in the previous episode.
You can still be,
but he saved a puppy.
You can still be a bad person.
He can still be a bad person, but like do a redeeming thing. Like Clovis can still be like a butt face. Right. But
I think he had a redeeming act that happened, but it wasn't a active thing that he did as much as it was circumstance.
Which in my mind is not redemption. That's you accidentally doing a good thing Intentionality is 9/10 of what redemption is about. And the fact is like when he writes the note with the lament, he basically calls out the fact that he is using his exo frame as a delegate to make amends to others. But he does not want to be bothered with making amends because in his view, he doesn't have anything to amend to. He says that society sees his actions as being evil, but he views them as being necessary sacrifices on his path to discover eternity in this reality. So that's where, like, it's like, look, I get that he did a good thing. Yeah, sure, bad people do good things all the time, but the intentionality behind that event, there is no remorse that is driving that event. So that's where I like, yeah. And that's, yeah, Dancing is talking about it kind of same as there, is like Crow cannot redeem Uldren because Crow is not Uldren. Uldren didn't have the ability to be redeemed, or he didn't choose to be redeemed while he was there. The other reason I brought this up is the ornament for the lament has a mention to a Greek mythological event that has a lot to do with resurrection and reincarnation. The ornament is called Leth's Mercy. So the Leth is one of the 5 rivers in Hades, and its particular power or element or ability is anyone who drinks from the river Leth will forget their past. They forget everything about their past, and they're basically made into a clean slate. So what they would do is this river was actually the river that ran the border of Elysium, which is where their equivalent of paradise was. And in order to get into Elysium, spirits were required to drink from it in order to forget their earthly lives. So they couldn't bring impure things into paradise. Later, historically, you also had myths where they would be given the choice to be reincarnated, but they had to drink from Leth, or they were given the choice to drink from Leth or Minosine, which is the river that does the opposite. It actually grants omniscience. Instead of forgetting everything, they learn everything. So with Leth's Mercy, you see the kind of a nod to the creation of Banshee, because he literally, and actually I'd almost argue for Guardians too, because they forget their past. But Banshee literally has his earthly life wiped away and is reincarnated as Banshee, which I found was a really cool kind of connection there.
So here's a question, just to throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing. With Banshee remembering the old memories,
correct.
How does that affect it?
Yep. Yeah. That's where I'm kind of curious about that, because the other wrench that I would say is he created Lament for his exo frame. So I'm curious. I mean, I'm curious if the ornament is even applicable, but I did find the connection between the river Leth and the process of Banshee's transformation from Clovis. I found that somewhat similar in the way there, but you're right. That's why I'm curious how they're going to explain his getting memories back, because I thought they deleted them all.
Where's what card is it? It's the last card, isn't it, that talks about it?
It talks about 43 to Banshee 44.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's the Clovis 43 and it's the second half, because the first half is them shutting down the facility AI.
It also calls out poor Elsie, 815.
Yeah. Oh God.
That is so many uploads. It's interesting how he calls out in this book. It's his journal. Yours if you want it. Lock it away if you don't. It's mostly encrypted anyway. I read a bit. The kind of person I was. Fear-driven. Obsessed with legacy. I won't become that. Not again. It's time for you and your siblings to rebuild the Bray legacy the right way. So this is right before he changes, right?
That's correct. He is still Banshee 43 at that point. Or not Banshee, sorry. He is Clovis 43. Yeah.
Yeah, Clovis. Because of that, he still has a lot of the memories, even though it's not all of the memories, because he's looking at this journal and he knows who he was. But he still chooses for the complete wipe because he chooses to touch that memory loss, that the River of Leth, or what you had mentioned, essentially. Because he knows what he was before he goes into this.
Correct. I guess my argument against that is he knows Clovis as the same as anyone who's reading an autobiography knows him. Or is it biography or autobiography? I can always flip those. The person that writes their own.
That's an autobiography.
Okay, thank you. I always flip them. So like if you read an autobiography of Clovis Bray, you can see you can get an idea of maybe the type of person, but even that is a polished, presentation of that individual to the outside world. That's different than saying he was Clovis.
I mean, you could still read, we read the journal and it's still ghastly.
Oh yes. No, I mean, I hate even bringing this up, but I mean, that's like reading Mein Kampf. Like, sure. Oof. It's a published thing that was supposedly published. It's still a horrific thing, not to mention it makes your head hurt because it's terribly written. But like, that's like, you can read there are autobiographies that do not put the writer in a good light, but that still doesn't mean that you are that person. Like you have a glimpse into the snapshot of the life of that person that was writing it at the time. But I mean, when you read about Clovis 1 being reactivated, he does not have the memories because he was reactivated in the middle of a battle against the Vex.
Right.
Now, that being said, it is also where we find that the facility AI does have the memories of Clovis.
And is still a jerk.
Oh, yeah. No, you're right. Which, I mean, right. Yes. But like the AI, what was it in Memories of Win 1, he's like, the talking robot head is just as cold as the old man was. What else would you expect from the psycho who died and made himself into an all-seeing AI? Here's hoping that the unconscious exo in front of us is nothing like the real thing.
Well, that comes into a whole nother question. Does the AI have a worse megalomania because of its ability to be all-seeing on Europa versus a singular point of the exo?
I could see that definitely being the case. I mean, we see that's kind of like you see with Rasputin too, right? Is Rasputin's like degree of seeing everything has given him a sense of, I mean, he refers to himself basically as a deity. And so like, which is why when the darkness came and it beat him, he was so shocked. So like, I see the similarity of the inflation of the ego because of the capabilities, if you will, of the frame that they're stored in.
The ego still doesn't match the size of them. Nope.
No. So I'm trying to find here in this entry real quick because they broke the facility AI broke the protocol of the process of awakening Clovis 1.
Strong arms the person into making faster.
He threatened Wynn. He was like, because Wynn responded was like, well, Dr. Bray said that we shouldn't do that, and the facility AI is like, I'm the only Dr. Bray you take orders from. And so he then threatens Wynn that he's going to shut him down if he doesn't turn it on. Let's see. because then he goes on to say, once you've completed your training, there will be a shiny new toy waiting for you to commemorate your accomplishment, which is the original Lament sword.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but I think that was when Elsie actually showed back up, and then they had to leave because they were getting too close. Basically, the Vex were getting too close.
So if this is not, I mean, the purpose of this book obviously is not a redemption story per se.
I would agree with that, yes.
That being said, what is the purpose of this book from a writer's perspective? Orchid?
The point of this book is to humanize Banshee.
Ding ding.
The point, it's not, no one gives about, like, Clovis. It's to give Banshee a backstory and to humanize Banshee and to link all of Clovis Bray's story, but to take the past from that and to link it to our future and our present, and to give us that link. And it's that uncomfortable feeling that when you see him, and it's a lot like it's analogous to what happens when someone becomes a guardian. And it's analogous to Crow's story. It runs parallel to Crow's story. So it helps us as people in this particular season, actually, when we see Crow and we're like, oh, we're so freaking mad because, this guy killed Cade, and we were really upset, even though it happened 2 years ago at this point, or over a year ago. And like, it still kind of makes people mad a bit.
Just a bit.
Yeah, just a bit. I mean, the sting isn't there like it was. Like, it's still just kind of like, you're still mad about it, but you're kind of over it at this point because it's just been forever. You still miss Cade, but you're at the point where Crow is now a different person, and you've seen that he is distinct from Uldren. They are not the same. You've known Banshee since the beginning of Destiny, and now you've had this complete new story thrown at you that he is Clovis Bray. You're like, what? And I, like many people, made the mistake of just reading the last just the last chapter of this lore book and not the rest of it when it came out. So you just read that last spoiler where it's like, you read that Banshee is Clovis Bray, and you're like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
And then you're standing in the tower and you're looking at him, you're like, what monster are you? Because, like, at this point, you've had, like, the collector's edition, you've read all of these things, you know what he's done, you've been through Europa, you've seen everything, and you're processing all these things, and so you're humanizing these characters, and it's making you feel things, and it's making you see it from the opposite perspective, that instead of having a character that you detested, that the story made you feel that forced you to like them, it's taking a character that you've liked and loved for 7 years at this point, and it suddenly forced you to hate them.
It's forced you to question.
It really has, and it was masterfully done. And this is the lore book is not about questioning whether, like, is it a redemption arc? Is it not? Is it, like, what is the meaning of life? Like, what's the meaning of, like, what is this person? And, like, is this really, like, this person or is this other one? No, it's like, it's just a good story. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Like, so many times, and this is my frustration with a lot of stories sometimes, like, we do it and other people do it too, is that you see something, you do deep dives into things, and you try to get to the nitty-gritty of stories, but sometimes they're just good stories. And that's what this is. It's just a really good story.
I do think something that you touched on early on is something that was very deliberate of Bungie, in that Bungie used this story and Banshee as a way to help balance what was gonna happen with Crow, because you have two opposites, right? You have somebody we've known forever, and you have somebody who we knew prior to becoming a guardian, and we've already forgiven Banshee because we've known him forever. And so your inclination is, even though you find out he's Banshee and he's starting to remember some of these things, that currently you question what's going on with him, but you still are more apt to forgive him because you knew him as Banshee for so long, versus Crow, who was Aldrin and who was an utter jerk during D1, killed Cade during Forsaken, and then comes back as Crow, and Crow is a completely different character, even though there's hints of the old prince in there. I think because of Banshee being there, it'll basically pave the way for people to understand Crow a little bit more and be more apt to forgive them.
Yeah.
Maybe not forgive Aldrin, but not hold any ill will to Crow.
Yeah. And I think that's the true purpose of this story when it comes down to it as a storytelling perspective. I think between this and the letter that Osiris puts in our mailbox, when we first get Crow and they say he's not Aldrin, like, don't shoot him in the face.
There's also the mission recently that dropped when Crow disappears at the end of the mission. And you assume, like, who was it that's in there? Osiris assumes that he just left you to hang, but Crow's actually working to hold off the celebrant.
Oh, and when you're doing, that's the big mission when you're in the Dreaming City. Yeah. You didn't really leave, did you? No, I would never do that.
Makes you question, though.
That one.
I think Bungie has been playing with the idea of questioning people's motives this season more than most seasons, as far as the story writing goes. What do you think, Blue?
I mean, like, I agree. I focus on the nitty gritties of the stories being told. That's just the way my brain works. So, like, I see what you guys are saying about the overarching piece of it being a parallel with Crow's story. I mean, I'm personally in the camp that's never had a problem with Crow. I mean, I didn't have a huge problem with Aldrin, to be honest, but like I focus in because I'm much more interested on the story of Clovis. That's where my interest actually is, because it has a lot of weight to be potentially present with regards to not just the motivation of the characters within the Golden Age, which led to, you know, motivations within the Dark Age and within the Collapse and within the City Age and all that. But it also has potential for revealing some information about characters that we don't have much about on origin purposes. It has potential for explaining the convergence of humanity or human technology and light. It has potential because it does the same with human technology and darkness. The thing is that if you are wanting to talk about parallels, we have a lot of parallels with Clovis's story and his megalomania with regards to what he did with the darkness and with the radiolarian fluid. You can technically take that in a different direction and look at some things with what could be done with light. And there's a theory that is really prevalent out there that, you know, maybe that's where Ghost came from. I find that an interesting theory because the ramifications of if that theory is accurate in any form or fashion is much more severe than a lot of people think it. You know, there's the added difficulty here of like splitting personalities, and me personally, I find interest, or I'm always intrigued by the character's motivations, even the secondary character's motivations. If you introduce a character in a writing, I'm going to be the person who sits there and tries to figure out why the person is doing what they're doing, even if it is a side character. That's the way I read stories. So like I get the like this isn't the point of the story. And it's like, well, that's not the point of the story for you guys, sure. I would strongly disagree that it's not something to be considered, because I think the story as a large picture, sure, is a parallel, but there's also significant differences here that if you don't take into account will fracture much further up. You know, there's a lot of parallels between Banshee and every single Guardian out there because of the resurrection process.
So,
However, okay, yeah.
So here's the question then. You're spending a lot of time not refuting, but like arguing a little bit against the idea of this being a writer's tool to ease in Crow. What is the purpose of this story then? What is it? What was the use of this story from the writer's perspective?
The use of this story was, I mean, I'm not arguing that is what you guys are saying. It's designed to parallel the character of Crow. It's also picking up on one of the many characters that we have a lot of experience with that honestly we don't know anything about. Which that list is growing shorter, sure, but you know, we had zero information about Banshee before this story.
Except for the fact that Banshee tried to log into an old iPad, essentially, with an old login.
Right. We had random scannables and the idle dialogue from him that, you know, the idle dialogue makes a lot more sense, even from the idle dialogue back in D1 that we had from him. You know, it makes sense. It puts it in a new context for sure. But of all the characters and all the vendors in the tower currently right now, Banshee was one of the only ones that we really didn't have an origin of. I mean, to be honest, we know quite a bit about the Vanguard. We know quite a bit about Shax now. Raul, we know a little bit about. We don't really know about his origins, but we know about his personality more so outside with the introduction of Ives. Tess, we know her story. Eva, we got her story. You know, we have, well, right. We have all these stories for all these vendors, but we don't have that for Banshee, which I think is also kind of the purpose, is also to round out the characters. And I mean, I think they did an amazing job with this. I'm also the person that you start throwing stuff in, like the word Leth, and I pick up that's connected to a mythological event. And that mythological event corresponds to the story purpose. So to me, the connections are, when I read stuff, I see connections, and I'm not going to make an argument strongly that the connections are necessarily the most important of them.
Sure.
But I can't deny that the connection is there.
Sure.
Which then when I see that connection, it snowballs into other connections, right? And it makes me start thinking about, you know, what's going on here? What's the motivation for this purpose?
Blue, you need your spin foil hat.
Oh yeah, I mean, I live in it. I mean, you know that. I totally will spin foil snowball myself into random connections. That being said, I'd like to think that I keep a pretty solid grip on what's actually happening here. To me, the gossamer connections in the background of the story to me are much more interesting than the broad strokes that are so obvious. I guess that's where I would come back. But that being said, take a quick break real quick for an ad, and then we'll be right back.
Myth is a podcast about the very soul of humanity. Join me each week as I explore stories from our history, from our mythologies, about what it means to be human. I'm your host, Tom, and Myth is available on every podcatcher, anywhere. And if you're familiar with any of my other work, then you might realize that Myth is like a lorecast, but for humans. Join me each week on Myth.
Do you want to talk about the exotic quest at all? How that ties into this? Or thoughts on...
So the thing that I'd like to talk about is the the writer's choice to release this lore in tandem, basically, with the quest, right? Like, we didn't have this. I don't think we had this beforehand. Did we?
Yeah, because you got
we got it through the exos. You had to pick
Correct.
up the exos to get the lore, right?
You technically, I got this book before the raid dropped. I think you could get. You might not have gotten the last one, but I mean, you got the brunt of this book before the raid dropped, because this was this was attached to the exo collectibles.
The fact that you really don't know the reveal at the end, though, until after the raid and Legacy drops, or the sword Lament drops. That was terrifying, because I initially thought, oh my gosh, they're going to make Banshee evil. Why? Did you guys have any initial thoughts about it?
When I first started reading this, I was like, oh, I have a few theories of where this is going. I didn't ever think of Banshee going dark in that sense. But that's also mostly because the disconnect that I had between the entire Lament quest and the ending here, which is the question I still don't really have an answer to, is they wiped his memories, but now he's remembering them. It's like, so you did a half-assed job? Like what happened there? So like, and I mean, I won't say that I don't see it as a potential for Banshee to go dark. Like, especially if like Clovis uses, like, I don't know, if Clovis tries to use him as a mobile platform or whatever. But then, that being said, if that happens, I would argue that's not Banshee anymore. It's Clovis overriding him.
It's a hard line to draw where the one personality stops and one begins.
See, I disagree. I don't think it's a hard line to draw at all.
Well, you like things black and white.
No, not at all. I just think that in regards to this, the minute that you start having experiences separate from the other entity, that is a personality that is unique and different from that other personality. It's very similar to, I don't know if I'm not sure if everyone's watched Altered Carbon, but there is an event in the near the end of the first season in which they basically create duplicate copies of the same person in two physically different bodies. And it's interesting to see like they do this and then they kind of leave them and then they come back together and they start working, like they work together basically. But it's interesting to see one of them who dies, the other one recognizes that they die, but it's recognizing that it's a separate, unique person. It's not them. Like, they didn't die, but they did die, like, in that sense. So I guess, I don't know. I never really thought of, I never gave weight to the idea that that Banshee would go bad. I don't know. Orchid, what about you?
I mean, it didn't occur to me either. The only thing that I thought, because he doesn't start regaining his memories until after the raid dropped and the raid was completed. So I thought maybe because you dropped security that something happened. Because you unlock the raid, because you're actually like messing around in security and you're messing around with other stuff in the actual Deep Stone Crypt and you're touching things you shouldn't be touching. And so like, I don't know, like the way that they're actually like cloud saving together, I don't know, stuff is happening. You know what? They're robots and this is space magic and stuff happens and we don't know enough about the way the system actually works because the game is still being very cagey about that. So We can only make suppositions at this point. So there you go. That's how this works. It's all supposition and guessing.
I mean, that's half the fun of it.
Because it is half the fun of it. Yeah. But we don't know. So there you go.
It would be
Here's your answer.
It would be interesting to see the options that come out of this, because Bungie is very, especially this writing team, I feel is very, very clever in how they're choosing to utilize the options that they have in front of them. And so if they choose to, they could choose to have this be a darker story, or they could choose to leave it where it's at. I'm more inclined to think that's what they're going to do, is just leave the Clovis story kind of where it is. To move on to the Zavathun story and the when Mara comes back and everything, because that's likely going to happen hopefully soon. But it is an option, and they love their little threads.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see this as I hate saying it, but a filler story. But it also is exactly that too. What you just said, I think, Green, is that it's a loose thread that they can come back and pluck on.
I don't think it's a filler story.
I mean, okay, so here, let me.
I mean, like, are you talking about
clarify?
Like, Lament in general?
Filler story
or...
as means of it is putting content in there to help bridge something, but in and of itself, it's not a hugely significant part.
Well, you can't have every single story in a game be a hugely significant part,
Right? Oh,
because then nothing would be significant.
I don't mean that negatively. I mean it I mean that you have to have the story that happens when a hero goes from point A to point Z. You have to have all the letters between too.
I think it's...
I mean, if you're going to... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that having Banshee's story, or having Banshee being tied to Clovis, is a fairly significant thing, because it brings the past forward in a different way, because we see the past in front of us. We see Banshee now in front of us every day when we go to the tower, and we see that was Clovis, even though that's not him now. It's bringing forward the consequences of something that happened prior and bringing it to light.
That, and I think that in itself is important in a different way, just because it's not explaining a mechanic or explaining like why exos do, X, Y, Z thing, or it doesn't explain why like ganked up Vex Juice does a certain thing, or, I just like saying that.
Volta Glass is coming up.
I know, I'm so excited. You have no idea. And just, it just because it doesn't explain like a certain way something in the game works, it doesn't mean that it isn't significant in a different way. And I think character exploration is important in a different way. And characterization is the thing that ties the story together. So I think this is a very significant piece in the actual like game and storytelling itself, because Banshee is a significant character, even though like he was just a guy that stood in the tower at a table that we would go talk to, and he would give us stuff. Like, I don't know, he'd give us weapons parts, and we would go talk to him once in a while, but he's a constant that we've had for so long. That we've had people come and go in the tower. We've had like Eris Morn come and go, and Cade has come and gone in our lives, but Banshee's always been there. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. So it was high time that we really explored like who he was as a character. So no, like this was very important as a story. This was very foundational. Second blue.
I'm leaving that in when I edit, just saying.
We'll just, it's okay. We don't have to agree on everything. We can agree to disagree on some things. So, final thoughts on the book. Green.
Final thoughts. Concise. I think that the book was a good tool and that it was the timing of the book aligning with Crow was very well done. And that I am terrified to see what comes of Banshee.
What about you, Orchid?
I love this book because I think it is good characterization, and it is actually an exciting book to read because when you actually read the book itself, you're never standing still. You're always in kind of a sense of panic, running from point A to point B to point Q to point Z, like all the way through the book, because like you're at this point where you're not reading it from any one individual. You're always reading it from a different perspective. So like one of them, a guy that's been reset because he's been on the front line, so he dies a lot, and you're like, oh my god, like this is how it is to be like in front in the vault, like in the Glassway, like trying to go farm stuff like on, you know, like the Forge Star, or this is the way it is, like you're trying to escape and like save all these humans, but you know, Clovis Bray is being like a real or like there's all these different little tiny aspects, and there's all this like very humanization that you get from all of these exos. And so yeah, they're programmed to be human, but they are the most human out of all of us. And so out of that, I think it makes it a really beautiful story. And so it's one of my favorite, if not my favorite, lore books this season.
I agree with you. I like the way that the story definitely grounds these characters, and points to the humanity within them, and also the inhumanity in others. I think that is a very big thing that they succeeded here. I think that the tone, I agree with you also in that too. Like the tone, the sense of, oh god, gotta go. You know, that from the very, very first entry to really the second to last. The last entry is not really that you don't get that franticness, but all the way through, you know, that entire like from the Glassway strike, or not the strike, but the Glassway battle, to the battle against the facility AI, to the final pushing back of the Vex in the Glassway, and the success that they experienced, that is made that much more potent because you see the loss that they acquire, or the loss that they suffer throughout that entire process. And that also culminates in a really powerful conclusion of the one that has been alive the least, really sacrificing everything to fully defeat the, you know, one of the antagonistic forces within the story. I think that really drives home the sacrifice that Banshee made in that choice from 43 to 44. So I mean, yeah, I agree. I think it's well written, for sure. I really enjoyed reading this, and you know, I think if you don't want to read it again, we kind of mentioned this at the start, but Guardians of Lore have read this. This was, you said 96 and 90 episodes, 96 and 97.
Episode 95 and 96,
okay, 95 and 96.
And we did the actual sword itself in a little lore, which was the episode after those, so episode 97.
So definitely, if you guys want an audio reading with Orchid, definitely check those out.
That's me, guys.
It's a me, Orchid.
It's a me. Hey, it's Orchid.
So shout outs. Green, what do you got for us?
My shout out goes to Orchid, and she could check Twitter to figure out why.
Oh no.
Blue.
Sorry, handling something in chat.
Yeah, I deleted. Oh, you did.
Yeah, no, my big shout out is to both of these lovely ladies that are podcasting with me and putting up with my really stupid fascination on minute details, and just, I don't know, like, Yeah, I think that's it. Orchid.
Actually, I am going to shout out my other co-host, Elamist. So, Elamist, thank you so much for being you and putting up with me all the time, and for being like the emotional tether to these stories, because without you, I think a lot of the very real part of these lore books would be missed. So thank you. You are really awesome.
Well, as always, I want to thank you for your time. And until next time, remember, with wisdom we conquer, stand strong, stand tall, and keep exploring. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusedFireChat. Links to all our episode archives can be found at www.thelorenetwork.com. Please be sure to email us at focusedfirechat@gmail.com with any comments and or questions for the team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. So until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.